The thunder of hooves echoed across the prairie as Quinn McAllister raced through the gathering dusk, his daughter's fever burning through the thin fabric of her nightgown and into his chest. The 7-year-old's auburn curls, so like her mother's, clung damply to her flushed face as she whimpered in pain. Quinn's heart hammered against his ribs, outpacing even his stallion's desperate gallop toward the lights of Eureka, Colorado, that flickered in the distance like earthbound stars. "Hold on, Lily," he whispered, his voice breaking as he urged his horse faster. "Just hold on, sweetheart." Eureka wasn't much a dusty thoroughfare lined with wooden buildings, a couple saloons, a general store, and a small church, but it had one thing Quinn's isolated ranch didn't: a doctor. Or at least it used to. Quinn prayed Dr. Simmons hadn't moved on like so many others had since the mine had started yielding less silver and more disappointment. The year was 1883. And life in the Colorado Territory was unforgiving in ways that still surprised Quinn, even after 8 years of ranching alone with his daughter. Since losing his wife, Margaret, during childbirth, he'd managed to keep their small cattle operation running while raising Lily the best he could. But tonight, as his daughter burned with fever in his arms, the bitter truth he'd been avoiding crashed down on him. A man alone wasn't enough. Quinn thundered down Eureka's main street, drawing curious glances from the few townsfolk still about in the early evening. He reined his horse to a stop outside the doctor's office, a modest clapboard structure with a faded sign, and dismounted with Lily cradled against him. The door flew open before he could knock, revealing not Dr. Simmons but a woman Quinn had never seen before. She stood framed in the yellow lamplight, her honey-brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, though wayward tendrils had escaped to frame her face. Her blue calico dress bore the telltale stains of medical work, and her green eyes widened as they took in the sight of the desperate man and his sick child. "Dr. Simmons isn't here," she said quickly, already reaching for Lily. "But I can help. I'm Katherine Novak. I've been working with him since spring." Quinn hesitated only a moment before the urgency of his daughter's condition overcame his surprise. "She's burning up. Started this morning and just kept getting worse." Katherine's hands were already checking Lily's pulse and temperature as she led them inside. "How long has she had the rash?" "Rash?" Quinn looked down, alarmed. "I didn't see any rash." Katherine gently turned Lily's arm, revealing a faint patterning of red spots Quinn hadn't noticed beneath the dirt and grime of ranch life. She worked efficiently, directing Quinn to lay Lily on the examination table while she gathered supplies. "Scarlet fever, most likely," she explained, mixing a powder into water. "We need to break her temperature and keep her comfortable. With proper care, she should recover, Mr. McAllister, Quinn McAllister. My ranch is about 10 miles northeast." He watched Katherine work, competent hands moving with practiced ease. "Where's the doctor?" called to a mining accident near Silver Plume. "He won't be back for days." She held the medicine to Lily's lips, coaxing the semi-conscious child to drink. "I've been his assistant for 4 months now. I came west from Boston after completing my training." Quinn's brow furrowed. "You're a doctor." "Not officially." A shadow crossed her face. "Women aren't permitted to earn medical degrees at most institutions, but I trained under one of the few female physicians in Boston for 5 years. I know what I'm doing, Mr. McAllister." Quinn nodded, recognizing the determination in her eyes. Whatever her credentials, she clearly knew more than he did about treating his daughter's illness. "What do we do now?" "She needs constant care for at least a week. The fever will rise and fall. There's a risk of complications: her heart, her kidneys." Katherine's directness was tempered with compassion. "She can't be moved back to your ranch." The implications sank in. A week in town meant leaving the ranch unattended or riding back and forth daily, losing precious hours of work. As a widower with no family nearby, Quinn had few options. "I can stay with her here tonight, but I'll care for her," Katherine interrupted, seeming to read his dilemma. "There's a small room behind the surgery where I stay. She can remain here under my supervision." Relief flooded Quinn, quickly followed by wariness. He didn't know this woman, had never left Lily with a stranger since Margaret died. But looking at his daughter's flushed face, he recognized he had little choice. "I need to get back to the ranch, tend to the livestock. I could return tomorrow afternoon." Katherine nodded, already bathing Lily's forehead with cool water. "Bring some of her things, a nightgown, perhaps something familiar to comfort her." Quinn stood awkwardly, hat in hand, torn between necessity and reluctance. "How much do I owe you?" Katherine glanced up, her eyes meeting his. "We'll discuss that when your daughter is well, Mr. McAllister." Something in her steady gaze reassured him. This woman might be a stranger, but there was a quiet competence about her that reminded him of Margaret, practical. No nonsense, yet gentle. "Thank you, Miss Novak." "Katherine," she corrected. "If I'm to care for your daughter, we should dispense with formalities." Quinn nodded, settling his hat back on his head. "Quinn, then." He leaned down and pressed a kiss to Lily's forehead. "I'll be back tomorrow, sweetheart. Miss Katherine will take good care of you." As he left, casting one last glance at his daughter, Quinn couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in his carefully constructed world. He'd ridden into town desperate for help, aware of his inadequacy as a single father, only to find it in the form of a woman who challenged everything he thought he knew about medicine, and perhaps about women themselves. The next week passed in a blur of worry and exhaustion. Quinn rode into town each afternoon, spending a few precious hours with Lily, before returning to the ranch for evening chores, and a few hours of sleep before dawn brought another day of ranch work. Lily's fever broke on the third day, much to his relief, but Katherine insisted she remain under observation. During his visits, Quinn found himself studying Katherine Novak as much as checking on his daughter. She moved with quiet efficiency around the doctor's office, somehow managing to keep Lily entertained with stories and simple games while monitoring her recovery. Despite her Eastern upbringing, there was nothing fragile about Katherine. She carried water, chopped wood for the stove, and climbed onto a chair to replace a broken window pane without a second thought. "How did you end up in Eureka?" Quinn asked on the fifth day, as they shared a simple meal of stew while Lily napped. Katherine's spoon paused midway to her lips. "I wanted to practice medicine somewhere it was needed. In Boston, there are dozens of doctors competing for patients. Here." She gestured toward the window and the dusty street beyond. "Here people have real need and fewer prejudices about who provides care when they're desperate enough." Quinn nodded, understanding that sentiment all too well. "And your family?" A shadow crossed her face. "My father died in the war. My mother passed 3 years ago. I have a brother somewhere in California, but we're not close." She looked at him directly. "What about Lily's mother, if you don't mind my asking?" "Margaret died bringing Lily into the world," Quinn said, the familiar ache rising in his chest, though duller now with the passage of time. "There were complications. The midwife did what she could, but—" He shook his head. "Perhaps if someone with your training had been there, things might have been different." Katherine's expression softened. "You've done remarkably well raising her alone. She's bright, well-mannered, and clearly adored." "I've done my best," Quinn acknowledged, "but there are things." He hesitated, unaccustomed to confiding in anyone, let alone a woman he barely knew. "There are things a girl needs that I can't provide. Woman things. Like knowing when to check for rashes," Katherine suggested with a gentle smile. Quinn found himself chuckling despite the seriousness of the conversation. Among other things, she's growing so fast, there'll be matters I have no experience with. Katherine set down her spoon. Quinn, every parent, mother, or father faces moments of uncertainty. The key is recognizing when to seek help. Like riding 10 miles in a panic to find a doctor who isn't even there, he asked wryly. Exactly like that. Her smile lit up her face, transforming her from merely pretty to truly beautiful. The realization made Quinn unexpectedly uncomfortable. He stood abruptly, gathering the empty bowls. I should head back to the ranch. The evening chores won't do themselves. Katherine didn't press, simply nodding as she rose to check on Lily. She's much improved. I think she could return home tomorrow, provided you continue giving her the medicine I've prepared. Relief and something like disappointment mingled in Quinn's chest. That's good news. Thank you for everything you've done. It's why I'm here, Katherine replied simply. The next day, Quinn arrived earlier than usual, bringing his wagon to transport Lily home. He found her sitting up in bed, color returned to her cheeks, chattering animatedly to Katherine about a book they'd been reading together. "Papa," Lily called when she saw him, arms outstretched. Quinn gathered her close, savoring the normal warmth of her skin against his. "Ready to go home, sweetheart?" Lily nodded against his shoulder, then pulled back to look at him seriously. "Can Miss Katherine come visit us? She promised to teach me about the flowers that grow in the meadow and which ones can make medicine." Quinn glanced at Katherine, who looked slightly embarrassed. "I may have made some promises to keep a restless patient occupied," she admitted. "But I would be happy to visit, if that's acceptable to you." Before Quinn could respond, Lily continued eagerly. "And I told her about the hole in my blue dress and how you tried to fix it, but it looks funny now. And she said she could show me how to sew it properly. And about my hair. Papa, she knows how to braid it so it doesn't get all tangled when I sleep." Quinn felt a flush creep up his neck, embarrassed by this catalog of his domestic failures. "Lily, Miss Katherine is very busy with her medical duties. We can't expect—" "Actually," Katherine interrupted, "Dr. Simmons returned late last night. With him back, my schedule is more flexible." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "And I've been meaning to make some house calls to outlying ranches. Medical care shouldn't be available only to those who can reach town easily." Something about the way she offered practical, without pity, framing it as a professional duty rather than charity made it easier for Quinn to accept. "We'd be honored to have you visit then," he said formally. "Perhaps this Sunday. We could offer you dinner after church if you attend." "I'd like that very much," Katherine replied with a smile that reached her eyes. As Quinn loaded Lily and her things into the wagon, he found himself looking forward to Sunday with surprising anticipation. It had been years since anyone besides Lily had sat at their table. The ranch would need tidying, and he'd have to hunt something better than the usual stew they subsisted on. The ride home was filled with Lily's excited chatter about Katherine, how she knew stories about faraway places, could identify birds by their songs, and had shown Lily how to fold paper into animal shapes. Quinn listened, amused by his daughter's obvious admiration for the woman who had nursed her back to health. "She's the prettiest lady I ever saw," Lily declared as they approached the ranch. "Don't you think so, Papa?" Quinn cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Miss Katherine is a very capable medical practitioner." Lily giggled. "That's not what I asked." "Lily McAllister, that's enough sass from you," Quinn said, though without heat. "You're still recovering, so it's straight to bed when we get home." The ranch looked exactly as he'd left it that morning, the small clapboard house weathered but sturdy, the barn and corral beyond, cattle grazing in the distant pasture. Yet somehow it felt different, as though he was seeing it through new eyes. Through Catherine's eyes, perhaps. He noticed the peeling paint on the shutters, the missing boards on the porch steps, the general air of functionality without comfort. For the first time in years, Quinn felt the absence of a woman's touch in their home. Margaret had made this place warm once, with curtains at the windows and wildflowers in mason jars on the table. Since her death, he'd maintained the essentials but let the niceties slip away, focusing on keeping the ranch running and Lily fed and clothed. Sunday suddenly seemed both too far away and too soon. Quinn wasn't sure whether he was more anxious about Katherine seeing their sparse home or about his own unexpected eagerness to see her again. The days passed in a flurry of activity as Quinn attempted to make the ranch presentable. He repaired the porch steps, swept months of dust from corners, and even managed to iron his good shirt without burning holes in it. Lily, fully recovered, followed him around with suggestions and questions. "Papa, shouldn't we have flowers on the table? Miss Katherine put flowers by my bed every day. Papa, can we make a pie? Miss Katherine mentioned she likes apple pie." By Sunday morning, Quinn was exhausted from the combination of regular ranch work and preparation for their guest. He and Lily attended church in town, as they did most Sundays, and Quinn found his eyes scanning the pews for Katherine. She sat near the back, dressed in a simple blue dress that complemented her eyes, her hair arranged more elaborately than he'd seen during Lily's treatment. After the service, Lily broke away from him, running down the aisle to greet Katherine with unrestrained enthusiasm. Quinn followed more sedately, nodding to neighbors as he passed. "Miss Katherine, are you still coming to dinner? Papa made everything nice, and we're having rabbit stew because he shot 2 yesterday, and I picked wildflowers for the table." Lily's words tumbled out in excitement. Katherine laughed, the sound light and musical in the emptying church. "I am indeed, if the invitation still stands." She looked up at Quinn, a question in her eyes. "Of course," he confirmed, suddenly formal in his Sunday best. "We'd be pleased to have you join us. My wagon is outside whenever you're ready." The ride to the ranch was less awkward than Quinn had feared. Katherine asked thoughtful questions about his cattle operation, revealing an unexpected knowledge of agriculture. "My grandfather had a farm in Pennsylvania," she explained. "I spent summers there as a child, nothing as extensive as your ranch, but enough to learn the rhythm of rural life." "Is that why you agreed to come to Colorado?" Quinn asked. "Because you had some familiarity with country living." Katherine considered this. "Partly, but mostly because I wanted to make a difference. In Boston, I was always the assistant or the nurse, doctor. Simmons may technically be my superior, but he treats me as a colleague. Out here, people care more about whether you can help them than about the letters after your name." Quinn nodded, understanding. The West demanded practicality above propriety. It was why he'd never faced much scrutiny. As a single father, neighbors cared more about whether his fences were sound, and his cattle didn't stray onto their land than about his domestic arrangements. They crested the final hill, and Quinn's ranch came into view below. He saw it anew through Katherine's eyes, the sturdy barn and corrals, the grazing cattle in the distance, the vegetable garden Lily had insisted on planting beside the house. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs, carved from the wilderness through years of hard work. "It's lovely," Katherine said, sounding genuinely impressed. "You've built something remarkable here, Quinn." Pride straightened his shoulders. "It's still a work in progress. Margaret had plans for an orchard down by the creek and eventually a larger house." "Margaret sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. The familiar grief touched him, but differently now, a gentle acknowledgement rather than the raw pain of earlier years. She would have liked you. She was practical like you are." Catherine's smile held a trace of melancholy. "I'll take that as a high compliment." Lily, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during this exchange, suddenly pointed ahead. "Look, Papa, a deer!" Sure enough, a mule deer stood at the edge of the trees near the house, ears pricked toward the approaching wagon. It bounded away as they drew closer, disappearing into the pines. "We see them most evenings," Quinn explained. "They come down to the creek to drink." "Nature's neighbors," Katherine commented. "In Boston, the only wildlife was rats and pigeons." Lily's face scrunched in disgust, making both adults laugh, breaking the momentary solemnity that had fallen over them. Quinn helped Katherine down from the wagon with a hand that lingered perhaps a moment longer than necessary. He felt unaccountably nervous as he led her toward the house, noticing all its shortcomings with fresh eyes. The curtainless windows, the weathered porch, the sparse furnishings visible through the open door, but Katherine didn't seem to notice these deficiencies. She exclaimed over the view from the porch, admired the straight rows of Lily's garden, and complimented the sturdy construction of the house itself. Inside, Lily proudly showed Katherine her room, complete with the rag doll she'd had since infancy and books Quinn read to her each night. Katherine examined everything with genuine interest, asking questions that made Lily beam with importance. Quinn busied himself with dinner preparations, grateful that he'd started the stew before church. By the time the women emerged from Lily's room, the table was set with their mismatched plates and the wildflowers Lily had gathered arranged in an old mason jar. "Something smells wonderful," Katherine said, entering the kitchen. "Can I help with anything?" Quinn shook his head. "It's nearly ready, though I won't claim it meets the standards of Boston cuisine." Katherine smiled. "After a week of my own cooking, anything prepared by someone else is a feast." They settled around the table, and Quinn hesitated only briefly before offering a blessing for the meal. It had been Margaret's tradition, one he'd maintained for Lily's sake, though his own faith had wavered after his wife's death. The meal passed pleasantly, with Lily keeping the conversation flowing through her eager questions about Katherine's life in Boston and her medical knowledge. Quinn found himself relaxing, enjoying the novel experience of adult conversation at his table. After dinner, while Lily cleared the dishes insisting on showing Katherine she could help, Quinn invited their guests to see the rest of the ranch. "I'd like that," Katherine said, and something in her tone made Quinn's heart beat a little faster. They walked together in the golden late afternoon light, Quinn pointing out the improvements he'd made over the years and the project still waiting for time and resources. Katherine listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than mere politeness. As they reached the creek that marked the property's eastern boundary, Quinn found himself talking about Margaret and their dreams for the ranch. "We came out here with nothing but hope and determination," he explained, watching the water ripple over stones. "Everyone said we were crazy to try ranching this far from town, but Margaret believed in the land." "She was right to believe," Katherine said softly. "You've made something beautiful here." Quinn looked around at the cottonwoods swaying in the breeze, the distant mountains turning purple with the approaching sunset, the ranch buildings nestled in the valley below. "Yes," he agreed. "But sometimes I wonder if I'm doing right by Lily, raising her so far from other children without—" He hesitated. "Without a mother," Katherine finished for him. Quinn nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "There are things I can't teach her, conversations I don't know how to have. She's growing up so fast." Katherine was quiet for a long moment. "Children are remarkably resilient, Quinn, and Lily has something many children lack. Even with two parents, she knows she's deeply loved. But is love enough?" The question escaped before Quinn could consider its implications. Katherine turned to face him directly. "No," she said honestly. "It's not. Children need guidance, knowledge, boundaries, and yes, different perspectives, but those don't have to come from a mother and father under one roof." Quinn frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean that family isn't just blood. It's community, neighbors, friends, people who care." Katherine gestured toward town. "Lily has you, her father who would ride through the night to get her medical help. But she also has neighbors who greet her at church, a community that notices when she's absent. And now," she added with a small smile, "she has a friend who can answer questions about women's matters when the time comes." The offer, made simply and without pretense, lifted a weight from Quinn's shoulders. "You do that, even after she's no longer your patient?" "Of course," Katherine said, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "I care about Lily, and—" She hesitated, color rising in her cheeks. "I've enjoyed getting to know her father as well." The admission, soft as it was, hung between them in the golden evening light. Quinn found himself studying Katherine's face, the intelligence in her green eyes, the determination in the set of her jaw, the unexpected gentleness of her smile. Here was a woman unlike any he'd known since Margaret educated, independent, choosing a path few women dared to walk. "I've enjoyed knowing you too, Katherine," he said finally, his voice rougher than he intended. "And I'd be grateful for your friendship with Lily." If Katherine was disappointed that he spoke only of Lily, she didn't show it. She simply nodded and turned back toward the house, where Lily was visible on the porch, waving excitedly. "Papa, Miss Katherine, I found a toad by the water barrel. Come see." Katherine laughed, the sound carrying on the evening breeze. "Duty calls, it seems." They walked back together, close but not touching, each aware of something unspoken between them. The weeks that followed established a new pattern in the McAllister household. Katherine rode out to the ranch most Sundays after church, sometimes staying for dinner, other times joining them for afternoon outings to the creek or the high meadow where wildflowers grew in profusion. She brought books for Lily, teaching the girl to identify local plants and their medicinal properties, and began showing her simple needlework. For Quinn, these visits became the highlight of his week. He found himself planning improvements to the ranch that he'd long postponed, repainting the shutters, building a proper garden fence to keep rabbits from Lily's vegetables, even planting the orchard that Margaret had dreamed of. "Apple trees take years to bear fruit," Katherine observed one Sunday in late summer, as Quinn marked out the orchard site near the creek. "I'm a patient man," Quinn replied, driving a stake into the ground. "And I believe in planning for the future." Katherine didn't respond immediately, and when Quinn looked up, he found her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What?" he asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing," she said quickly. It's good to see you looking forward, making plans. When I first met you, you seemed trapped in survival mode," Quinn suggested wryly. Katherine nodded. "Something like that." Quinn drove another stake into the ground, considering her words. "I suppose I was. After Margaret died, keeping the ranch going and Lily fed took everything I had. There wasn't energy for much beyond getting through each day." "And now?" Katherine asked softly. Quinn straightened, looking across the land he'd worked for 8 years. "Now I'm remembering there's more to life than just surviving it." He met her eyes directly. "I have you to thank for that reminder, Katherine." The moment stretched between them, fragile and potent. But before either could speak further, Lily's voice called from the house, breaking the spell. "Papa, Miss Katherine, there's a man coming." Quinn shaded his eyes, looking toward the road where a rider approached. He recognized the town's mayor, Harold Jenkins, and frowned. The mayor rarely made the journey to outlying ranches without purpose. I should go see what brings him all this way, Quinn said, setting down his tools. Katherine nodded, falling into step beside him as they walked back to the house. Mayor Jenkins dismounted as they approached, removing his hat. "McAllister," he greeted, then nodded to Katherine. "Miss Novak, didn't expect to find you out here. What can I do for you, Mayor?" Quinn asked, noting the man's grave expression. "Afraid I bring troubling news," Jenkins said, accepting the cup of water Lily brought him. "We've had word from Fort Collins, diphtheria outbreak. Bad one." Katherine stepped forward, suddenly all business. "How many cases? How far has it spread?" "Nearly 30 cases already. 2 deaths, both children." Jenkins looked grim. "Dr. Simmons asked me to find you. He's preparing to head up there tomorrow, says they need all the medical help they can get." Quinn felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. Diphtheria was a killer, especially of children, and Fort Collins was at least 2 days' ride. Katherine's face had gone pale, but her voice remained steady. "Of course. I'll return to town immediately and help with preparations." Jenkins nodded, relieved. "Doctor said to tell you to pack for at least 3 weeks. They've quarantined the affected area, but it may take time to contain." 3 weeks. Quinn felt the words like a physical blow, though he had no right to such a reaction. Katherine wasn't his wife, wasn't even courting him officially. She was a medical professional with duties that extended far beyond their Sunday visits. "I'll be ready," Katherine assured the mayor. "Thank you for bringing word." After Jenkins departed, declining their invitation to stay for dinner, a heavy silence fell over the 3 of them. Lily looked between the adults, her young face troubled. "Are you going away, Miss Katherine?" she asked finally. Katherine knelt to Lily's level, her expression gentle but serious. "Yes, sweetheart. There are children who are very sick, and they need doctors to help them get better, just like you needed help when you had scarlet fever." Lily's lower lip trembled. "But what if you get sick too?" "I'll be very careful," Katherine promised. "Dr. Simmons and I know how to protect ourselves while helping others." Lily didn't look convinced, but she nodded bravely. Quinn placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, feeling her tremble slightly beneath his touch. "Lily, why don't you go check if those biscuits are ready for dinner?" he suggested gently. Once Lily had gone inside, Quinn turned to Katherine. "This disease, it's dangerous for those treating it as well." Katherine nodded, not pretending to misunderstand his concern. "Yes, but we take precautions, and it's why I became a medical practitioner, Quinn. To help when I'm needed most." Quinn wanted to argue, wanted to ask her not to go, or at least to wait until they had more information. But he recognized the resolve in her eyes, the same determination that had led her to leave Boston for the Colorado frontier. "When will you leave?" he asked instead. "First thing tomorrow, I expect. There's much to prepare." Katherine looked toward the house, regret clear in her expression. "I should return to town now. Dr. Simmons will need help gathering supplies." Quinn nodded, understanding but unable to hide his disappointment. Their Sunday together, cut short by crisis. "I'll hitch up the wagon to take you back." "That's not necessary," Katherine began, but Quinn shook his head. "It's getting late and you have preparations to make. Please let me do this much." The ride back to Eureka was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. Lily sat between them, occasionally sniffling despite her efforts to be brave. When they reached town, Quinn helped Katherine down from the wagon, holding her hand perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Be careful," he said simply. Katherine's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'll write when I can, to let you know how things are progressing." Quinn nodded, unable to voice the tangle of emotions in his chest. As Katherine turned toward the doctor's office, Lily suddenly scrambled down from the wagon and ran to her, wrapping her arms around Katherine's waist. "Please come back," she whispered, loud enough for Quinn to hear. "Papa needs you." Catherine's eyes met Quinn's over Lily's head, a question in them he wasn't prepared to answer. She knelt, hugging Lily properly. "I'll do my very best," she promised, smoothing Lily's hair. "Now be good for your father, and remember what I taught you about checking the garden plants for medicinal properties." Quinn watched his daughter reluctantly return to the wagon, her small face determined not to cry. As they drove away, he resisted the urge to look back, knowing that if he saw Katherine standing alone in the fading light, he might not have the strength to continue toward home. The 3 weeks Mayor Jenkins had mentioned stretched into 5, then 6. Quinn received 2 letters from Katherine, both brief but reassuring. The outbreak was being contained, though slowly. She was well, though exhausted. Dr. Simmons had fallen ill but was recovering. No mention of when she might return. Life at the ranch continued its necessary rhythms: cattle to tend, repairs to make, meals to prepare. But Quinn found himself moving through these tasks mechanically, his thoughts constantly straying northward to Fort Collins and the woman working among the sick there. Lily became his anchor during this time. Her questions about Katherine's absence forced him to maintain optimism he didn't always feel. Her insistence on continuing the projects Katherine had started, the medicinal herb garden. The sampler Katherine had been teaching her to stitch kept Katherine's presence alive in their home, even in her absence. It was Lily who spotted the rider approaching one golden October afternoon as they worked together in the newly fenced vegetable garden. "Papa, someone's coming," she cried, dropping her trowel and scrambling to her feet. Quinn shaded his eyes, his heart leaping at the sight of a familiar blue dress and honey-brown hair. Katherine rode astride rather than side saddle, practical as always, her medical bag tied securely behind the saddle. Lily was already running down the path, Quinn close behind her, neither bothering to remove their dirt-stained gardening gloves. Katherine dismounted as they approached, her smile tired but genuine as Lily flung herself into her arms. "You came back," Lily exclaimed, voice muffled against Katherine's dress. "I promised I would," Katherine reminded her, looking over Lily's head to meet Quinn's gaze. He stood frozen, suddenly aware of his disheveled appearance and the emotion plainly visible on his face. 6 weeks of worry and waiting crashed over him as he took in the sight of her, thinner than before, with new lines of fatigue around her eyes, but gloriously, wonderfully here. "Welcome back," he managed, the words entirely inadequate. Katherine gently disentangled herself from Lily and stepped toward him. For a moment, neither spoke, simply taking in the sight of each other. "I missed you," Katherine said finally, simply. "Both of you." Something broke loose in Quinn's chest, a dam holding back feelings he'd barely acknowledged even to himself. "We missed you too, more than I can say." Lily looked between them, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Does this mean Miss Katherine will be coming to Sunday dinners again?" Katherine laughed, the sound slightly rusty as though it had been too long unused. "If I'm invited, I'd like nothing better." "You're always invited," Quinn said firmly, "for Sunday dinner and—" He hesitated, aware of Lily's attentive presence. "And for anything else you might wish to join us for." A faint blush colored Katherine's cheeks. "That's a generous invitation, Mr. McAllister." "Quinn," he corrected, finding courage in her blush. "And it's not generosity, it's selfishness if I'm being honest. These past weeks—" He glanced at Lily, choosing his words carefully. "These past weeks have made me realize how much brighter our lives are with you in them." Katherine's eyes widened slightly at this admission, and for a moment, Quinn feared he'd spoken too plainly, too soon after her return. But then she smiled, a full, unguarded smile that transformed her tired face. "I found myself thinking of this ranch often," she admitted. Of the creek and the meadow and the orchard you were planting. Her eyes met his directly. And of the man planting trees for a future he believes in. Lily, evidently sensing the importance of the moment, slipped her hand into Quinn's. Papa said the trees are for me when I grow up, but I think they're for all of us. Don't you think so, Miss Catherine? Catherine's gaze never left Quinn's. I think your father is a man who plans carefully for what matters most to him. The implication of her words hung between them, full of possibility. Why don't we go inside? Quinn suggested, his voice rougher than usual. You must be tired from your journey, and we'd love to hear about your time away or not, if you'd prefer to put it behind you. Some parts I'd rather forget, Katherine acknowledged as they walked toward the house. But there were moments of hope too, even amidst the suffering. Children who recovered against all odds, families reunited. And you're really all right, Quinn couldn't help asking, studying her face for signs of illness or deeper exhaustion than was visible at first glance. Catherine's smile softened. I am. Tired, yes, changed perhaps, but well. Inside, Lily insisted on showing Katherine all the progress she'd made on her sampler and the new plants she'd identified in her botany book. Quinn busied himself preparing tea, listening to their conversation with a contentment he hadn't felt in weeks. As evening approached, Quinn reluctantly mentioned the growing darkness. You shouldn't ride back to town alone at night. I could hitch up the wagon. Actually, Katherine interrupted, I've been invited to stay with the Perkins family just down the road. Mrs. Perkins is expecting her third child soon, and she's had some concerning symptoms. Dr. Simmons asked me to check on her while he catches up on town patients. Quinn nodded, trying not to show his disappointment that she wouldn't be returning to town, yet pleased she would be nearby. The Perkins place is only about 3 miles from here. Mrs. Perkins mentioned you've been helping Mr. Perkins with some fence repairs while I was away, Katherine said. She speaks very highly of your generosity. Quinn shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Neighbors help neighbors out here. It's how we all survive. It's more than survival, Katherine observed. It's community. The same kind of community that came together to fight the diphtheria outbreak, people caring for one another, even at risk to themselves. Her words reminded Quinn of their conversation by the creek, before her departure, about family being more than just blood relations, about Lily needing a community, not just a father. How long will you be staying with the Perkins family? He asked. A few days, perhaps a week. After that. Katherine hesitated. Dr. Simmons has asked me to consider a more permanent arrangement in Eureka. Quinn's heart quickened. What sort of arrangement? A partnership of sorts. He's not getting any younger, and the journey to Fort Collins showed him the value of having a trained associate. Pride colored her voice. He's offered to sponsor my application for formal medical credentials based on my years of training and practical experience. Katherine, that's wonderful, Quinn said sincerely. You deserve that recognition. It would mean staying in Eureka permanently, she added, watching his face carefully. Establishing a practice alongside Dr. Simmons, eventually perhaps taking over when he retires. Quinn couldn't hide his smile. I can think of nothing better for the town. Or, he added more softly, for those of us who live nearby. Lily, who had been listening to this exchange with growing excitement, clapped her hands. Does that mean you'll be able to come for Sunday dinners every week, and teach me more about plants, and show me how to fix Papa's terrible sewing? Lily, Quinn admonished, though without heat. Katherine laughed. If your father continues to extend the invitation, I would like that very much. Her eyes met Quinn's again, carrying a deeper question. The invitation stands, Quinn said firmly, for as many Sundays as you wish. As dusk deepened into evening, Quinn insisted on escorting Katherine to the Perkins farm. Lily, though reluctant to be left behind, was persuaded to stay home with the promise that she could show Katherine her newest botanical drawings on Sunday. They rode side by side in the gathering darkness, the only sounds the steady clop of their horses' hooves and the evening calls of nighthawks overhead. Quinn found himself stealing glances at Katherine's profile, still hardly believing she had returned and might stay permanently. "I was afraid," he admitted finally, breaking the comfortable silence. "When you were gone so long, I feared you might not come back." Katherine turned to look at him, her expression serious in the fading light. "There were moments I feared that too. Not because I didn't want to return, but because the work was dangerous. Yet you went without hesitation." "It's who I am, Quinn," she said simply. "Just as staying to protect your ranch and daughter during my absence is who you are." Quinn nodded, understanding. "I admire your courage, your dedication." "And I admire yours," Katherine replied. "Raising Lily alone all these years, building something lasting for her future." They rode in silence for another moment before Quinn gathered his courage. "Katherine, I know this may seem sudden, though it doesn't feel sudden to me at all. But I find myself thinking of you as more than just Lily's medical provider or even our friend." Katherine's hands tightened on her reins, but she remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "When you were gone, I realized how quickly you'd become essential to our happiness, not just Lily's, but mine as well." Quinn took a deep breath. "I don't expect you to answer now or to feel the same way. But I wanted you to know that if you do choose to stay in Eureka permanently, I hope you might consider. That is, I would like to court you properly if you're amenable." In the dim light, he could see Katherine's smile bloom slowly across her face. "Quinn McAllister, I was beginning to wonder if you would ever ask." Relief and joy coursed through him. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes to courtship," Katherine clarified. "What comes after we'll discover together. I have my work, my calling. That won't change." "I wouldn't want it to," Quinn assured her. "Your dedication to healing is part of who you are, part of what I admire most about you." They had reached the Perkins farm, lights glowing welcomingly in the windows of the small homestead. Quinn dismounted first, moving to help Katherine down from her horse. As his hands circled her waist, they paused, looking at each other in the lantern light spilling from the nearby house. "Sunday dinner, then?" Katherine asked softly. "Sunday dinner," Quinn confirmed. "And perhaps a walk by the creek afterward." Katherine nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "I'd like that very much." For a moment, Quinn thought he might kiss her, right there in the Perkins' front yard. But voices from the house reminded him of propriety and the fact that their courtship was just beginning. "Until Sunday," he said, reluctantly stepping back. Katherine smiled, understanding in her eyes. "Until Sunday." The next months passed in a sweet rhythm of Sunday dinners, afternoon walks, and gradually increasing time together. Katherine divided her time between medical duties in town and outlying ranches, often arranging her visits to end near the McAllister ranch. Quinn found reasons to be in town more frequently, sometimes bringing Lily, sometimes riding in alone to escort Katherine on short rides through the countryside. Their courtship progressed slowly but steadily, each finding in the other a companion who understood the demands of their respective responsibilities, Quinn to his ranch and daughter, Katherine to her patients and medical studies. Far from creating distance between them, these commitments formed the foundation of their mutual respect. By Christmas, Katherine had become such a regular visitor that Lily insisted they hang a stocking for her beside their own on the mantel. Quinn presented Katherine with a small wooden box he'd carved himself, decorated with the wildflowers she'd taught Lily to identify. Inside lay a simple silver brooch, modest but elegant. "It was my mother's," Quinn explained as Katherine opened it. One of the few things I brought west with me." Katherine touched the brooch reverently. "Quinn, I couldn't possibly, please," he interrupted gently. "It would honor her memory to see it worn by someone she would have admired greatly." Katherine's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she nodded, allowing Quinn to pin the brooch to her dress. The moment felt significant, a step beyond courtship toward something more permanent. As winter melted into spring, their relationship deepened. Quinn found himself sharing thoughts and dreams he'd kept private for years, his hopes for expanding the ranch, his concerns about Lily's education as she grew older, his memories of Margaret that had begun to feel less painful and more precious with Katherine's gentle encouragement. In turn, Katherine revealed her own struggles, the ridicule she'd faced as a woman pursuing medical training, her fear that she might never be fully accepted as a physician in her own right, her occasional loneliness in a profession dominated by men. One evening in early May, as they walked along the creek where apple blossoms now scented the air from Quinn's young orchard, Katherine broached a subject they'd been circling for weeks. "Dr. Simmons received a letter yesterday," she began, her voice carefully neutral. "From the medical board in Denver. They've approved my credentials based on his recommendation and my work during the diphtheria outbreak." "Katherine, that's wonderful news," Quinn exclaimed, genuinely delighted for her. She nodded, though her expression remained serious. "It is. But it also presents a decision." She stopped walking, turning to face him directly. "The board has offered me a position at their new hospital in Denver, a chance to work with other female physicians, to teach even." Quinn felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath his feet. "Denver," he repeated, trying to keep his voice steady. "That's quite an opportunity." "It is," Katherine agreed. "One I would have accepted without hesitation a year ago." The implication of her words hung between them, filled with possibility. Quinn took her hands in his heart pounding. "And now?" he asked quietly. Katherine's eyes met his, clear and direct as always. "Now I find myself torn between professional advancement and personal happiness. The life I've found here in Eureka, the work that needs doing, the people who have come to matter to me." Her voice softened. "You and Lily." Quinn squeezed her hands gently. "I would never ask you to give up your calling, Katherine. It's part of who you are, part of why I—" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "Part of why I love you," Katherine's breath caught. It was the first time either had spoken the word aloud, though it had been understood between them for months. "And I love you," she replied without hesitation. "Both of you. Which is why this decision is so difficult." Quinn was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then an idea formed, unexpected but somehow perfect. "What if it didn't have to be a choice between your career and us?" Katherine looked at him quizzically. "What do you mean?" "Eureka is growing. The mine has a new vein that's promising. There's talk of the railroad extending a line through the valley." Quinn spoke quickly, the plan forming as he articulated it. "The town needs dedicated medical care, especially with Dr. Simmons aging. But it also needs someone with connections to larger medical communities, someone who could perhaps travel to Denver occasionally for further training, bringing back new techniques." Understanding dawned in Katherine's eyes. "You're suggesting I could do both, maintain a practice here while still engaging with the medical community in Denver?" Quinn nodded eagerly. "Exactly. It would mean travel sometimes, periods away, but not permanently." He hesitated, then added quietly, "And you would have a home to return to. With people who love you." "People who love me," Katherine repeated, her eyes searching his. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Quinn McAllister?" Quinn took a deep breath. This wasn't how he'd planned to propose. He had no ring ready, had prepared no speech. But suddenly waiting another day seemed impossible. "I am," he confirmed, still holding her hands. I'm asking if you might consider making your home with us permanently. As my wife, as Lily's mother, though I know you've already become that in all the ways that matter." Catherine's smile bloomed slowly, like the apple blossoms above them. "You know, when I first met you, you told me your daughter needed a woman's touch." Quinn nodded, remembering that desperate night when he'd carried Lily into town, fever-stricken and frightened. "I did, and she does. But what I've come to realize," Katherine continued, stepping closer, "is that it wasn't just Lily who needed me. Her father needed someone too, not to replace what he'd lost, but to help him build something new." "I did," Quinn admitted. "I do. Every day." Katherine released his hands only to place hers on either side of his face. "Then my answer is yes. Yes to staying in Eureka. Yes to building a medical practice here while maintaining ties to Denver. And yes, Quinn McAllister, to becoming your wife." Joy surged through Quinn as he wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her off her feet in an uncharacteristic display of exuberance. Katherine laughed, the sound echoing across the water like music. When he set her down, Quinn couldn't resist any longer. He lowered his head and kissed her, their first kiss, sweet and promising and worth every moment of their careful courtship. "Should we tell Lily?" Katherine asked when they finally broke apart, her cheeks flushed and eyes bright. Quinn smiled, tucking a strand of honey-brown hair behind her ear. "She'll be overjoyed, though not surprised. She's been dropping hints for months about how nice it would be if you lived with us all the time." Hand in hand, they walked back toward the ranch house, where Lily waited on the porch, her sharp eyes spotting them immediately. She waved excitedly, clearly having been watching for their return. "I think she suspects something," Katherine observed, squeezing Quinn's hand. "She's a smart girl," Quinn agreed proudly. "Takes after her mother, both of them." The simple acknowledgement that Lily could carry the legacy of the mother, who had given her life, as well as the woman who would help guide her into adulthood, felt right. A bridge between past and future. As they approached the house, Lily ran to meet them, her keen eyes immediately noticing their clasped hands and matching smiles. "Did you ask her, Papa? Did you say yes, Miss Katherine?" she demanded, practically bouncing with excitement. Quinn and Katherine exchanged startled glances, then burst into laughter. "Yes to both questions," Quinn confirmed, putting his arm around Lily's shoulders. "How did you know?" Lily rolled her eyes with the exasperated patience of a child explaining the obvious to adults. "Because you love each other, of course. And because I heard you practicing your speech to the bathroom mirror this morning, Papa." Katherine stifled a laugh as Quinn's ears reddened. "I see I'm marrying into a family with no secrets." "None," Lily agreed happily. "So when will you come live with us? Can you teach me to make that medicine for headaches? Will you help me with my reading every night like Papa does? Can I call you Mother?" The barrage of questions continued as they walked arm in arm toward the house, the setting sun gilding the scene in golden light. Quinn watched the two people he loved most in the world, his daughter, and the woman who had unexpectedly completed their family. Felt a contentment he had thought lost forever. The wedding took place in early June, a simple ceremony in Eureka's small church, followed by a celebration that brought together townsfolk and ranchers from throughout the valley. Dr. Simmons gave the bride away, beaming with pride at his protégé and new partner. Lily served as flower girl, solemn with the importance of her role until the moment Katherine and Quinn were pronounced husband and wife, at which point she broke protocol to fling herself into both their arms. Their life together unfolded with the natural rhythm of the seasons. Katherine divided her time between the medical practice in town and their ranch home, where she established a small dispensary for treating neighbors' ailments without requiring them to make the journey into Eureka. Quinn expanded the ranch operations, secure in the knowledge that during his occasional absences to drive cattle to market, Lily remained in loving, capable hands. As Katherine had predicted, Lily blossomed under her guidance, developing an interest in both ranching and medicine that suggested she might one day combine these passions in her own unique way. The girl who had once needed a woman's touch grew into a confident young woman, equally at home delivering a calf or assisting Katherine with setting a neighbor's broken arm. 2 years after their wedding, Katherine gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl named Thomas and Rebecca, who from their earliest days displayed the determined spirit of both their parents. Quinn found himself marveling at how thoroughly his life had transformed from that desperate night when he had ridden into town with a sick child, seeking only a doctor and finding instead the missing piece of his family's heart. On the 5th anniversary of their first meeting, Quinn took Katherine to the orchard by the creek, now bearing its first small crop of apples. As they walked among the trees he had planted the summer they met, Quinn squeezed his wife's hand. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Choosing us over Denver?" Katherine looked up at him, the same directness in her gaze that had first captivated him years ago. "Never. I haven't given up medicine, I've expanded it, bringing care to people who might never have received it otherwise." She gestured toward the town in the distance. "And Dr. Simmons says our arrangement for me to study in Denver quarterly keeps the practice more current than most rural clinics in the territory." Quinn nodded, acknowledging the truth of this. Katherine's reputation had grown over the years, drawing patients from neighboring communities and even occasional consultations from doctors passing through the region. "And the personal aspects," he pressed gently. "Being tied to one place, one family." Katherine stopped walking, turning to face him fully. In the dappled light filtering through apple leaves, she looked as beautiful to him as she had that first night in the doctor's office, perhaps more so. For now, he knew the strength of character that matched her external beauty. "Quinn McAllister," she said firmly, "I am not tied to this family. I am rooted in it, drawing strength from it even as I give strength in return." She placed her hand on his chest over his heart. "You once said your daughter needed a woman's touch. What you didn't realize was how much I needed a family's love, not to complete me, for I was already complete, but to share my completeness with." Quinn covered her hand with his own, overwhelmed as always by her wisdom and clarity. "I love you, Katherine McAllister, more with each passing day." "And I love you," she replied simply. "For the man you were when we met, for the man you are now, and for all the years we have ahead." As they walked back toward the ranch house, where Lily would be watching the twins while preparing dinner, Quinn reflected on how thoroughly his life had been transformed by that desperate ride into town years ago. He had sought only medical help for his daughter, believing what she needed most was a woman's touch to guide her through childhood. What he hadn't expected was how thoroughly that woman would touch his own heart, awakening it from grief and teaching him that love wasn't a finite resource to be hoarded, but an ever-expanding circle, large enough to honor the past while embracing a future brighter than he had dared to imagine.